Rich man laughs at orphan's toy. Years later, he's begging for forgiveness. The bustling streets of the city were alive with activity, the sound of car horns and chatter blending into a familiar symphony. In the heart of this chaos was Charles Whitman, a man whose name was synonymous with wealth and power. Dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, he strode confidently into the luxury hotel hosting the annual charity gala. The event, organized by a local orphanage, was one of those obligatory appearances on Charles's calendar. To him, it was a chance to rub elbows with other influential figures, secure donations, and maintain his reputation as a philanthropist. But beneath the surface, Charles had little patience for the cause itself. He often joked to his peers that these events were more about image than impact. Mr. Whitman, a cheerful event coordinator, greeted him as he entered. "Thank you for joining us today. The children are excited to meet all the guests." Charles plastered on his practiced smile. "Happy to be here," he said, his voice smooth but devoid of sincerity. The room was filled with other well-dressed attendees mingling around tables adorned with elegant centerpieces. In one corner, a group of children from the orphanage were gathered, their faces lighting up as each guest approached to interact with them. Charles sighed internally, bracing himself for the obligatory small talk with the kids. Among the children was Marcus, an 8-year-old boy with bright eyes and a wide smile. In his hands, he clutched a small, worn toy car. Its paint was chipped, and one of its wheels wobbled, but to Marcus, it was his most treasured possession, a reminder of his late parents, who had given it to him on his 5th birthday. When Charles approached, the coordinator introduced him to Marcus and the other children. "This is Mr. Whitman, one of the city's most successful businessmen," she said, her tone brimming with admiration. "Hello, kids," Charles said, kneeling slightly to their level. His polished grin faltered as he noticed Marcus holding up the toy car. "Look, sir," Marcus said proudly, holding the car higher. "This is my favorite toy. It's really old, but it's special." Charles stared at the car for a moment before letting out a laugh, sharp and condescending. "That old thing? Why are you holding on to something so worthless?" The room seemed to go silent for a moment as Marcus's smile faded, his small hands lowering the car. His cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and he looked down, trying to hide the hurt in his eyes. "It's not worthless," Marcus mumbled, but his voice was barely audible. "Oh, come on," Charles said, standing back up and addressing the adults nearby. "Surely someone can get this boy a proper toy. Something new. That thing looks like it belongs in the trash." A few guests chuckled nervously, unsure how to respond, while the coordinator quickly ushered Charles away. Marcus stood there, clutching his car tightly, his once bright eyes now clouded with sadness. The moment stuck with Marcus as he grew older. Though he tried to push it aside, Charles's words had planted a seed of self-doubt. Yet, instead of letting it defeat him, Marcus used it as fuel. He made a promise to himself. One day, he would prove his worth, not to Charles, but to himself. Life in the orphanage wasn't easy. Resources were limited, and opportunities were few. But Marcus had a tenacity that set him apart. He excelled in school, spending hours at the library reading about business, innovation, and personal growth. His favorite stories were those of people who had started with nothing and built empires through hard work and determination. When he wasn't studying, Marcus worked part-time jobs, saving every penny he could. By the time he turned 18, he had secured a scholarship to a prestigious university. Though the path ahead was daunting, Marcus faced it with unwavering resolve. He carried his toy car with him everywhere, a quiet reminder of where he came from and the strength he had found in adversity. While Marcus was climbing his way toward success, Charles's life was heading in the opposite direction. For years, he had enjoyed the spoils of his empire, luxury homes, expensive cars, and a network of powerful connections. But his business practices, often fueled by greed and unethical shortcuts, eventually caught up with him. A series of bad investments and legal scandals sent his company into a downward spiral. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up, and the media turned against him. Within months, Charles went from being a titan of industry to a man struggling to keep his head above water. The fall from grace was brutal. Charles sold his properties, his cars, and anything else of value just to cover his mounting debts. Friends and colleagues who had once flocked to him for his wealth and influence now avoided him entirely. For the first time in his life, Charles felt what it was like to be truly alone. Years later, on a chilly afternoon, Charles wandered aimlessly through the city, his once pristine suit now wrinkled and worn. His gaze fell on a small community center, its bright mural-covered walls standing in stark contrast to his somber demeanor. Curiosity, or perhaps desperation, drew him inside. The center was bustling with activity. Children played games, volunteers handed out meals, and a group of young adults listened intently to a speaker at the front of the room. Charles lingered near the entrance, unsure of his place in this lively, welcoming environment. As he observed the scene, his eyes landed on the speaker, a tall, confident man who exuded warmth and charisma. There was something familiar about him, though Charles couldn't quite place it. The man was talking about resilience, about finding strength in adversity and using it to build a better future. "My name is Marcus," the man said, his voice clear and passionate. "And I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you. But I'm here to tell you that you can overcome anything with the right mindset and support." Charles's breath caught in his throat. Marcus. The name triggered a flood of memories. Most notably, the boy with the toy car at the charity event years ago. Could it really be him? The confident, accomplished man standing before the crowd bore little resemblance to the shy child Charles had dismissed so cruelly. When the event ended, Marcus stayed to chat with attendees, offering encouragement and advice. Charles hesitated, unsure if he should approach, but something compelled him to step forward. "Excuse me," Charles said, his voice hesitant. Marcus turned, his expression shifting as he recognized the older man. For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. "Mr. Whitman," Marcus said finally, his tone measured. "It's been a long time." Charles nodded, his face a mixture of shame and humility. "It has. I owe you an apology. For what I said to you all those years ago. I was wrong and I see that now." Marcus studied him, his gaze steady but not unkind. "You really hurt me that day," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But I've learned that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone." Charles looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. I wanted you to know that I regret the way I treated you." Charles looked up, gratitude and surprise flickering across his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stood there, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil bubbling within Charles. For a man who had once dismissed Marcus as just another insignificant face in the crowd, Charles now felt dwarfed by the aura of confidence and integrity that radiated from him. The tables had turned in a way Charles could have never imagined. "Would you like to sit down?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward a nearby bench. Charles hesitated, unsure if he even deserved the chance to sit beside the man he had belittled so many years ago. But with a heavy nod, he followed Marcus to the bench and sat, his hands clasped tightly together. For a moment, they sat in silence, the sounds of laughter and chatter from the children around them filling the air. Charles finally spoke, his voice laden with regret. "I've lost everything," he said quietly. "My wealth, my reputation, even the people I thought were my friends. I've realized how wrong I was about everything. And I've thought about that day, what I said to you, more times than I can count." Marcus listened intently, his expression unreadable. "It sounds like life has given you some hard lessons," he said after a moment. Charles nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground. "It has. And it's shown me just how selfish and blind I was. I thought money and success made me better than everyone else, but now I see that it was all an illusion. None of it mattered." Marcus let the words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "You're not the first person to learn that lesson the hard way," he said. "But what matters now is what you do with that realization. Are you ready to change?" Charles looked up, his eyes brimming with sincerity. "I am. I don't know where to start." Over the next few weeks, Charles began volunteering at the community center. It was a humbling experience for him, but also deeply rewarding. He helped serve meals, clean the facility, and mentor the children who came through the doors. For the first time in his life, he was giving without expecting anything in return. At first, some of the volunteers and staff were skeptical of his intentions. After all, this was the same man who had once epitomized greed and arrogance. But as they watched him work tirelessly, day after day, their doubts began to fade. Charles wasn't just going through the motions, he was genuinely trying to make amends. Marcus kept a close eye on Charles during this time, observing his efforts without interfering. He saw the way Charles connected with the children, how he listened to their stories and offered words of encouragement. Slowly but surely, the man who had once mocked a little boy's toy car was becoming someone who could make a difference. One afternoon, Charles was sitting at a table, helping a young boy named Jamal with his homework. Jamal, who had struggled with math for weeks, finally solved a problem he'd been stuck on. His face lit up with pride as he looked at Charles. "Thanks, Mr. Charles," Jamal said, beaming. "I couldn't have done it without you." Charles smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him. "You did all the hard work, Jamal. I just pointed you in the right direction." As Jamal ran off to play with his friends, Marcus approached the table, a thoughtful look on his face. "You've come a long way," he said, sitting down across from Charles. Charles nodded, his expression serious. "I've still got a long way to go. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something meaningful." Marcus leaned back, studying him. "It's not easy to admit when you're wrong. And it's even harder to change. But you've taken the first step, and that's more than most people ever do." Charles looked at Marcus, his gratitude evident. "Thank you for giving me the chance to make things right. You could have easily turned me away." Marcus smiled faintly. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Besides, I learned a long time ago that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it gives us the freedom to move forward." As the months went by, Charles became an integral part of the community center. His efforts didn't go unnoticed, and many of the children and staff grew to admire him. But perhaps the most surprising development was the friendship that blossomed between him and Marcus. They spent hours talking about life, business, and the lessons they had learned from their respective journeys. Marcus shared stories about his struggles growing up in the orphanage, while Charles opened up about the emptiness he had felt despite his wealth and success. "You know," Marcus said one evening as they sat together after a long day, "I used to think that people like you had it all figured out. But now I see that we're all just trying to find our way." Charles nodded, his expression contemplative. "I spent so much of my life chasing things that didn't matter: money, status, approval. But now, I feel like I'm finally starting to understand what's important." "And what's that?" Marcus asked. "Connection," Charles replied without hesitation. "Making a difference in someone's life. Building something that lasts, not because it's flashy or impressive, but because it matters." Eventually, Charles approached Marcus with an idea. "I want to do more," he said. "The community center is incredible, but I think we could expand its reach. What if we created a program to help kids like Jamal with their education and career goals?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of program?" "A mentorship initiative," Charles explained. "We could pair kids with professionals in different fields, people who can guide them, teach them, and help them find their path. It's something I wish I had done earlier in my career." Marcus considered the idea, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I like it," he said. "Let's make it happen." Together, they worked tirelessly to bring the program to life. They reached out to local businesses, schools, and organizations, building a network of mentors who were eager to support the next generation. The program, aptly named Pathways to Potential, launched to great success, providing opportunities for countless children to pursue their dreams. The impact of the program was profound. Kids who had once felt lost or hopeless now had role models and resources to help them succeed. Jamal, the boy Charles had helped with math, went on to earn a scholarship to a prestigious university. He often credited the mentorship program for giving him the confidence to chase his goals. At a special event celebrating the program's success, Charles was invited to speak. Standing before a crowd of mentors, mentor, and supporters, he took a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "There was a time in my life when I thought success was about what you could take from the world," he began. But I've learned that true success is about what you can give. I've made mistakes, more than I can count, but I've been given the chance to make things right. And for that, I'm deeply grateful." He turned to Marcus, who was watching from the side of the stage. None of this would have been possible without the forgiveness and guidance of one man. "Marcus, thank you for showing me what it means to truly make a difference." The crowd erupted into applause, and Marcus stepped onto the stage to join Charles. The two men embraced, a testament to the power of redemption and second chances. In the years that followed, Pathways to Potential became a national initiative, changing the lives of thousands of children. Charles and Marcus continued to work together, their partnership built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to creating a better future. For Charles, life had come full circle. The man who had once mocked a little boy's toy car now spent his days building bridges, mending wounds, and helping others find their way. And for Marcus, the journey had been one of healing and growth, proving that even the deepest scars could lead to something beautiful. Together, they had turned a moment of cruelty into a legacy of kindness, one that would endure for generations to come. As Pathways to Potential grew, so did the relationship between Charles and Marcus. They became more than collaborators, they became true friends. Their partnership was built on a shared purpose, one rooted in a deeper understanding of what truly mattered, giving others the opportunities they themselves had once lacked. For Charles, this transformation was a daily journey. He still wrestled with the guilt of his past, but instead of letting it consume him, he channeled that energy into helping others. Every child who walked through the doors of the community center reminded him of Marcus as a boy, clutching his little toy car, determined to find value in something the world dismissed. It drove him to give these children not just resources, but hope. One day, while walking through the bustling community center, Charles stopped in his tracks as he overheard a group of children talking. "Mr. Charles used to be rich, right?" one boy asked his friend, curiosity evident in his voice. "Yeah, but now he's one of us," the other replied with a grin. "And he's cooler than any rich guy I've ever met." Charles chuckled softly to himself, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't known during his wealthiest years. He didn't need the trappings of his old life anymore. Here, surrounded by laughter and purpose, he felt richer than he ever had. Meanwhile, Marcus's influence continued to grow. His story became a beacon for others who had faced adversity, and invitations to speak at conferences, schools, and events poured in. Marcus remained humble throughout, always crediting the people who had believed in him along the way, from the teachers at the orphanage to the mentors who had guided him during his formative years. During one such event, a national youth leadership conference, Marcus told the audience about the toy car that had once been his most cherished possession. "That little car," he said, holding up a replica he had brought with him, "was all I had left of my parents. To me, it represented love, hope, and resilience. And though there was a time when someone tried to make me feel small for holding on to it, that car taught me an important lesson. Never let anyone take away what makes you strong." The audience erupted into applause, moved by Marcus's words. Sitting in the front row was Charles, who had accompanied Marcus to the event. He watched as the young people in the crowd hung on Marcus's every word, inspired by his journey. Charles felt a pang of regret, but also an overwhelming pride in how far Marcus had come. Back at the community center, Charles and Marcus began brainstorming new ways to expand their impact. One of their most ambitious ideas was to open a network of similar centers in underserved communities across the country. These centers would provide mentorship, education, and career training, as well as a safe space for children to dream big and work toward their goals. The idea was daunting, but Charles approached it with the same determination he had once used to build his business empire. He reached out to old connections, people who had distanced themselves from him during his downfall, and shared the vision. To his surprise, many of them were eager to help, impressed by the changes they saw in Charles. "You're not the same man I used to know," one former colleague said during a meeting. "And honestly, that's a good thing. Count me in." Marcus, too, leveraged his growing network of supporters, rallying philanthropists, educators, and community leaders to the cause. Together, they raised the funds needed to bring their vision to life. The first new center opened in a struggling neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. On opening day, Marcus and Charles stood side by side, watching as families poured in, exploring the facilities and signing up for programs. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the promise of new beginnings. As they walked through the building, a young girl approached them, holding a tattered notebook. "Excuse me," she said shyly, looking up at Marcus. "I heard you talking earlier about how you kept your car because it reminded you of your parents. I do the same thing with this notebook. It's the last thing my mom gave me before she passed away." Marcus crouched down to meet her gaze, his expression gentle. "That's beautiful," he said, "and you should hold on to it, no matter what anyone says. It's a part of your story, and your story matters." The girl smiled, clutching the notebook to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered before running off to join the other kids. Charles watched the interaction, his heart swelling with admiration for Marcus. "You have a way of making people feel seen," he said as they continued walking. "It's incredible." Marcus smiled, his gaze steady. "Everyone deserves to feel like they matter, Charles. Including you." As more centers opened across the country, the impact of their work became undeniable. Families were lifted out of poverty, young people discovered their potential, and communities found strength in unity. The media began to take notice, publishing stories about the remarkable partnership between Marcus and Charles. One journalist, during an interview, asked Charles how he had managed to turn his life around. "It wasn't easy," Charles admitted. "I had to face the consequences of my actions and confront the person I had been. But the truth is, none of this would have been possible without Marcus. He showed me what forgiveness looks like, and he gave me the chance to be better. For that, I'll always be grateful." Marcus, sitting beside him during the interview, added, "And Charles has shown me that people can change. His dedication to this work is proof of that. Together, we've turned a moment of pain into a movement of hope." Years later, at the 10-year anniversary of Pathways to Potential, Marcus and Charles stood before a crowd of supporters, mentors, and ments. The event was a celebration of everything they had accomplished, but it was also a moment to reflect on how far they had come. As Marcus took the stage to deliver his speech, he held up the same replica of his toy car that had become a symbol of his journey. "This car may be small," he said, "but it carries a big message, that even the simplest things can hold incredible value. What matters isn't how others see you, but how you see yourself. And when you believe in your worth, there's nothing you can't achieve." The crowd erupted into applause, many of them moved to tears. Charles joined Marcus on stage, his expression filled with emotion. Taking the microphone, he said, "I've spent most of my life chasing things that didn't matter. But standing here today, I realize that the greatest success isn't measured in wealth or status. It's measured in the lives you touch. Marcus has touched countless lives, including mine. And for that, I'll always be in his debt." As the applause grew louder, Marcus and Charles embraced, their friendship a testament to the power of forgiveness, redemption, and shared purpose. In the years that followed, their work continued to flourish, leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. Marcus and Charles proved that even the most broken beginnings could lead to something extraordinary, and that the greatest wealth of all was found in the lives they changed. The 10-year anniversary of Pathways to Potential marked a pivotal moment, not just for Marcus and Charles, but for the thousands of lives their program had touched. While the celebration showcased the program's achievements, it also served as a reminder of the power of second chances and the ripple effects of kindness. In the months following the event, Marcus and Charles began exploring ways to further their mission. The idea of international expansion was floated during one of their planning sessions. "There are kids all over the world who need guidance and mentorship," Marcus said as he reviewed proposals from interested organizations. "What if we could replicate this model globally?" Charles leaned back in his chair, his mind already racing with possibilities. "It's ambitious, but if anyone can pull it off, it's us." Their discussions led them to pilot programs in underprivileged communities abroad. They partnered with local leaders to ensure the programs were culturally relevant and impactful. From rural villages in Africa to underserved neighborhoods in Southeast Asia, Pathways to Potential began planting seeds of hope worldwide. One of their most memorable trips was to a small community in Kenya, where they opened a new center. The center was buzzing with excitement on its opening day, with children and families eager to explore the opportunities it offered. As Marcus and Charles walked through the crowd, they were approached by a young boy named Kofi. He held a hand-carved wooden truck, its wheels uneven but carefully crafted. "This is my favorite toy," Kofi said, holding it out for them to see. "My grandfather made it for me." Marcus crouched down, his heart swelling at the boy's pride. "It's beautiful, Kofi. Your grandfather must have been very talented." Kofi nodded, his eyes shining. He said, "It's not the toy that's important, it's what it teaches me." He said I should always keep moving forward like the truck. Marcus smiled, exchanging a glance with Charles, who seemed deeply moved by the moment. "Your grandfather sounds like a very wise man," Marcus said. "And he's right, keep moving forward, no matter what." As they walked away, Charles couldn't help but reflect on the boy's words. "It's incredible," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "No matter where we go, the message is the same. Resilience. Moving forward." Marcus nodded. "It's universal. And that's why what we're doing matters." Back in the United States, Marcus and Charles continued to deepen their bond, often reflecting on their unlikely journey. One evening, while sitting in Marcus's office, Charles brought up a topic he had been hesitant to discuss. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" he asked, his tone contemplative. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Charles. "What do you mean?" "If I hadn't mocked you that day," Charles continued, his gaze distant. "If I hadn't been so blind, so arrogant, would we even be here?" Marcus smiled faintly. "It's hard to say, but I've learned not to dwell on what could have been. Every experience, even the painful ones, shapes who we are. That moment, as much as it hurt, pushed me to become the person I am today. And it brought us to this point." Charles nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "I guess that's the beauty of life, isn't it? Even the worst mistakes can lead to something good." As the years passed, Pathways to Potential became a global movement. Its reach extended to dozens of countries, and its impact was felt by millions. Marcus and Charles became household names, not as celebrities, but as changemakers who had dedicated their lives to uplifting others. But their success didn't come without challenges. With growth came new obstacles, logistical issues, funding shortages, and occasional criticism from skeptics. Yet, through it all, Marcus and Charles remained steadfast in their mission. One particularly challenging period came during a global economic downturn. Donations dwindled, and the sustainability of the program was called into question. Faced with difficult decisions, Marcus and Charles rallied their team, brainstorming creative solutions to keep the centers running. "We didn't come this far to give up now," Marcus said during a team meeting. "If we have to fight for every dollar, we'll do it. These kids are counting on us." Charles, ever resourceful, reached out to his network, organizing a high-profile fundraiser that brought in millions. The event featured testimonials from men who had gone on to achieve incredible success, from doctors and engineers to artists and entrepreneurs. Their stories moved attendees to tears, reigniting support for the program. The fundraiser not only saved the program but also strengthened its foundation. It reminded everyone involved why they had started this journey in the first place. By the time Marcus and Charles reached their 20th year of partnership, they had accomplished more than they ever thought possible. They had built a legacy that spanned continents, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined. At a private dinner celebrating the milestone, Marcus raised a glass, his voice filled with gratitude. "To 20 years of resilience, growth, and second chances," he said. "And to the countless lives we've had the privilege of impacting." Charles raised his glass in return, his eyes glistening with emotion. "To forgiveness," he added. "And to the people who teach us what truly matters." Their friendship remained a constant source of strength, not just for each other, but for the people who looked up to them. They often joked about how unlikely their partnership had been, but deep down, they knew it was fate. One day, while walking through the original community center they had built together, Marcus stopped in front of a display case. Inside was his old toy car, carefully preserved and surrounded by photos and memorabilia from the early days of Pathways to Potential. Charles joined him, his gaze softening as he looked at the car. That little car started everything, didn't it? Marcus nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. Did. And it's a reminder that even the smallest things can lead to something extraordinary. Charles placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Thank you for forgiving me, he said quietly. For giving me a second chance? Marcus turned to him, his expression warm. You earned it, Charles. And you've proven that anyone can change, no matter where they start. As they left the center, the sounds of children laughing and playing filled the air. Marcus and Charles walked side by side, their steps in sync, their hearts full. They knew their journey was far from over, but they also knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. Together, they had turned a moment of cruelty into a movement of hope, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The original community center, nestled in the heart of the city, became a place of pilgrimage for those who had been inspired by Marcus and Charles's story. It was not just a building, it was a symbol of transformation. People from all walks of life came to see the display case holding Marcus's old toy car, the object that had sparked a movement. One day, as Charles walked through the center, he noticed a small group of children gathered around the case. They stared at the car with wide eyes, their voices filled with curiosity. Is that really his car? One boy asked, pointing at the chipped and faded toy. Yeah, another chimed in. And he kept it even when people laughed at him. Charles smiled, stepping closer. That's right, he said gently, kneeling to their level. Marcus kept it because it reminded him of his parents and where he came from. It's not about how something looks, it's about the meaning it holds. The children looked up at him, their faces thoughtful. Do you have something like that? One girl asked. Charles hesitated, taken aback by the question. For a moment, he wasn't sure how to respond. Then he smiled, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, worn notebook. Its edges were frayed and the cover was scratched, but it was clear the notebook had been well loved. This, Charles said, holding it up, is where I write down everything I've learned since I started working here. The lessons, the stories, the people who've inspired me. It reminds me of how far I've come. The children leaned closer, their curiosity piqued. Can we see what you wrote? One of them asked. Charles chuckled. Maybe one day. But for now, just remember this. It's not about where you start, it's about what you do with what you're given. As the years passed, Marcus and Charles's work continued to expand, reaching new heights. They established scholarships for underprivileged children, built vocational training centers, and even created a mentorship program specifically for young entrepreneurs. Their influence was felt in every corner of the world, and their names became synonymous with hope and redemption. But despite their success, both men remained grounded. They never forgot the moments that had shaped them, and they worked tirelessly to ensure that their mission stayed true to its roots. One of their most meaningful projects was the establishment of an annual Resilience Awards ceremony. The event honored individuals who had overcome significant challenges and gone on to inspire others. Each recipient was given a small replica of Marcus's toy car, a symbol of perseverance and strength. During one such ceremony, a young woman named Elena took the stage to accept her award. She had grown up in one of the centers Marcus and Charles had built, and her journey was a testament to the program's impact. When I was a little girl, Elena said, her voice steady but emotional, I didn't believe I had a future. My family struggled and I felt invisible. But this program gave me a chance to dream, to grow, and to become the person I am today. And for that, I am forever grateful. As the audience erupted into applause, Marcus and Charles exchanged a look of quiet pride. Moments like these reminded them of why they had started this journey and why they would never stop. Despite their busy schedules, Marcus and Charles made it a priority to spend time together outside of work. They often met for long walks in the park, where they would talk about everything from their plans for the future to their reflections on the past. During one such walk, Charles turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about what we've built? He asked. About how much it's grown? All the time, Marcus replied with a smile. But it's not just about the size of it. It's about the lives we've touched. That's what matters. Charles nodded, his gaze distant. I sometimes wonder, what would have happened if we hadn't crossed paths? If I hadn't been such a fool that day? Marcus chuckled, his tone light but sincere. Life has a funny way of teaching us what we need to learn. If it hadn't been that moment, it would have been another. What's important is that you changed, and that change led to something incredible. Charles smiled, his heart full. I owe you more than I can ever repay, Marcus. Marcus shook his head. You don't owe me anything. We've both grown from this. And that's enough. One day, as they were preparing for the opening of yet another center, Marcus received an unexpected letter. It was from a woman named Linda, who had been one of the volunteers at the orphanage where Marcus grew up. The letter was filled with warm memories and words of pride for everything Marcus had accomplished. At the bottom of the letter was a handwritten note, P.S. The toy car you left behind when you moved out is still safe and sound. I've kept it all these years, just in case you wanted it back. Marcus's breath caught as he read the words. He hadn't realized the car had survived his transition out of the orphanage, and the thought of seeing it again filled him with a mix of emotions. He shared the letter with Charles, who immediately offered to accompany him to retrieve it. When they arrived at the orphanage, Marcus was flooded with memories. The building had changed over the years, but it still held the same sense of warmth and belonging that he remembered. Linda greeted them with open arms, her face lighting up at the sight of Marcus. It's so good to see you, she said, pulling him into a hug. And to think of everything you've accomplished, it's nothing short of amazing. Marcus smiled, his gratitude evident. I couldn't have done it without people like you. Linda led them to a small storage room, where she carefully retrieved a box labeled with Marcus's name. Inside, nestled among old papers and keepsakes, was the toy car. Its paint was even more chipped than he remembered, and the wobbly wheel had grown looser over time. But to Marcus, it was perfect. He held the car in his hands, his heart swelling with emotion. It's been so long, he said softly, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Charles watched him, his own eyes misty. That car started everything, didn't it? Marcus nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Did. And it's a reminder of how far we've come. Back at the community center, Marcus placed the original toy car in the display case, alongside the replica. The two cars, side by side, told a story of resilience, redemption, and the power of small beginnings. Children and visitors often stopped to look at the display, their faces filled with wonder. To them, the cars were more than just toys, they were symbols of hope and possibility. As Marcus and Charles entered the later years of their lives, their work remained as impactful as ever. They had created a legacy that would endure for generations, but more importantly, they had found purpose and meaning in their journey. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Charles turned to Marcus with a smile. You know, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, I never imagined my life would turn out this way. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Marcus smiled back, his heart full. Neither would I, Charles. Neither would I. Together, they watched the sun dip below the horizon, their friendship a testament to the power of forgiveness, second chances, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Years passed, and the legacy of Pathways to Potential continued to grow, deeply embedded in communities worldwide. Marcus and Charles, though older now, remained active figures in the organization. Their bond had only strengthened over time, and their work had evolved to include not just children and young adults, but entire families. They had proven time and again that a single act of kindness could ripple out to change countless lives. One sunny afternoon, Charles visited the original community center, which now served as the headquarters for their global initiative. The familiar sounds of children laughing and playing filled the air, and Charles found himself smiling as he walked through the courtyard. He stopped by the display case housing Marcus's two toy cars, now iconic symbols of their journey. As he stood there, a young boy approached him, holding a battered soccer ball under his arm. Mr. Charles, the boy said hesitantly, why do you and Mr. Marcus keep those old cars in there? They're just toys. Charles knelt down to the boy's level, his smile warm. That's a good question, he said. These cars remind us that even the smallest things can hold great meaning. They tell a story about how something others thought was worthless turned out to be the start of something amazing. The boy tilted his head, intrigued. "So, it's like my soccer ball?" he asked, holding it up. "It's old, but it's the only one I have, and I play with it every day." Charles nodded. "Exactly. That ball is special to you, and that's what makes it valuable. Never let anyone tell you that it isn't." The boy's face lit up, and he ran off to join his friends, his confidence visibly renewed. Charles watched him go, a sense of fulfillment settling over him. Moments like these were why he had dedicated his life to this work. Meanwhile, Marcus was preparing for an upcoming event, the 25th anniversary of Pathways to Potential. It would be a massive celebration, honoring not only the organization's accomplishments but also the countless individuals who had contributed to its success. The event was set to take place in the city's largest convention center, with attendees flying in from all over the world. As Marcus reviewed the guest list, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The boy who had once been mocked for his toy car was now a global leader, shaping lives and inspiring change. But for Marcus, the greatest reward wasn't the accolades or recognition. It was the knowledge that their work was making a real difference. On the day of the event, the convention center buzzed with energy. Attendees, including former Ments, volunteers, and supporters, filled the massive hall, eager to celebrate the milestone. The stage was adorned with photos and videos showcasing the organization's journey, from its humble beginnings to its current global reach. Marcus and Charles sat together backstage, taking a moment to soak it all in. "Can you believe this?" Charles asked, his voice tinged with awe. Marcus chuckled. "There were times I never thought we'd make it this far. But here we are. And it's all because of you," Charles said, his tone serious. "You had the vision, the drive, and the heart to make this happen." Marcus shook his head. "It wasn't just me. It was us. We did this together." Charles smiled, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. More than I can put into words." "And I'm proud of you too," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "You've come a long way, Charles. And you've made a difference in more lives than you'll ever know." When it was time for their speech, Marcus and Charles walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. The applause was deafening, a testament to the impact they had made over the years. Marcus stepped up to the microphone, his heart swelling with gratitude. 25 years ago, he began, his voice steady but emotional. "We started with a simple goal, to give kids like me a chance. A chance to dream, to grow, and to believe in themselves. What began as one center has grown into a global movement, and that's thanks to all of you. Our mentors, our volunteers, and most importantly, the kids who inspire us every day." The audience erupted into applause, and Marcus took a step back, motioning for Charles to speak. Charles approached the microphone, his usual confidence tempered by the weight of the moment. "I'm standing here today because someone gave me a second chance," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Marcus could have turned me away when I came to him, broken and ashamed. But instead, he forgave me. He believed that I could change, and that belief saved my life. I owe everything to him, and to all of you who have supported this journey." Charles paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "This work has taught me that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to make a difference. And it's never too late to show kindness, even to those who may not deserve it." The crowd rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the hall. Marcus and Charles stood side by side, their friendship a testament to the power of redemption and resilience. As the celebration continued, attendees shared stories of how Pathways to Potential had changed their lives. One young woman, now a successful doctor, spoke about how the mentorship program had given her the confidence to pursue her dreams. A former mentee who had become an entrepreneur shared how the program had taught him the value of perseverance and community. Each story was a reminder of the profound impact Marcus and Charles's work had made. And as they listened, both men felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that their efforts had created something far greater than themselves. In the years that followed, Marcus and Charles continued to work tirelessly, though they began to pass the torch to a new generation of leaders. They mentored the next wave of changemakers, ensuring that the values and mission of Pathways to Potential would endure. One quiet evening, as they sat together in the courtyard of the original community center, Charles turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression. Do you think we've done enough? He asked, his tone contemplative. Marcus smiled, his gaze steady. We've done more than enough, Charles. But the work will never be finished, and that's a good thing. It means there will always be opportunities to make a difference. Charles nodded, his heart full. I'm grateful, Marcus. For everything. And I'm grateful for you, Marcus replied. You've shown me that even the most unlikely people can become the greatest allies. As they sat together, the sounds of children laughing filled the air, a reminder of the legacy they had built. For Marcus and Charles, their journey was a testament to the power of forgiveness, resilience, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could change the world. And so, their story became more than just a tale of redemption. It became a beacon of hope for generations to come, proving that no matter where you start, you have the power to create something extraordinary.